Have you ever wondered why some women wait? Not because they're weak, but because they know the silence will speak louder than any scream. It began on a Tuesday, the kind of day where the air feels heavy even though the sun is out. She sat at the kitchen table nursing lukewarm coffee, her eyes tracing the tiny crack in the ceramic mug she'd owned since college. Her husband's phone buzzed on the counter 3 times in less than a minute. Each vibration was sharp like a small earthquake in her chest. She didn't move at first. That's the thing, you don't run toward the wound right away. You let it bleed a little, see how deep it is. He walked in towel around his neck, hair damp from the shower. "Forgot my phone," he muttered, grabbing it with the swiftness of a man retrieving a stolen wallet. But not before she saw it, a contact name saved with a single heart emoji. No name, no number visible, just the heart. You've seen it before, haven't you? That moment where the air between two people becomes heavier than their history. She didn't ask, not yet. She smiled soft and dangerous, the kind of smile that says, "I've already started counting your sins." For weeks she collected evidence without touching a single thread. A late meeting here, a sudden need to clear his head with a drive there. His cologne, the one she gifted him last Christmas, lingering on his jacket when he claimed he hadn't worn it. But the most telling sign, the way he avoided looking at the baby when he came home. Their daughter, barely 10 months old, would squeal and reach for him, but he'd kiss her forehead quickly and drift toward his phone, as though her innocence was too much of a mirror. Maybe you'd confront him right then. Maybe you'd throw the phone, the jacket, the marriage out the door. But she was patient, too patient. One night while he was in the shower, she unlocked his phone. He'd grown sloppy, leaving the code the same. The heart emoji was a woman from work. Married. The messages were quick and cruel in their intimacy. "I can't stop thinking about you. Wish we had more time." And then, the one that made her pulse roar in her ears. "She'll never know." She could have walked into the bathroom right then and shattered his world. But she didn't, because this wasn't about rage. This was about control. The plan began to form like frost on glass, slowly, beautifully, inevitably. She wouldn't confront him directly. She would let the truth breathe on its own until it had nowhere else to go but out. So she waited. She let him dig deeper into his own lie, watching the way his eyes darted whenever she spoke casually about the future, about vacations, about the baby's first birthday. He thought he was playing her, but she was just setting the stage. The opportunity came during Sunday lunch with his parents. He adored performing as the doting husband and father in front of them. She dressed the baby in a little white dress with a bow, innocent, angelic. Halfway through the meal, when conversation drifted to how lucky he was, she leaned over to the baby and whispered just loud enough for the table to hear, "Tell Daddy who he's been texting." A silence fell so hard you could feel it in your bones. His mother's fork froze midair. His father glanced between them. The baby, of course, babbled nonsense, but it didn't matter. The seed was planted and every adult at that table could smell the smoke of something burning. He laughed it off too quickly, too tight in the jaw. But you know what happens when a lie is cornered? It starts to rot. Later that night, he asked her what the hell that was about. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply said, "I think you should tell me before the baby learns to speak." The color drained from his face. That's when she knew the power had shifted. He didn't confess that night. He shifted, he swerved. He threw up a wall of charm and half-truths like a magician palming coins. "You're tired," he said, every syllable soft, as if softness could erase the stink of betrayal. "You're anxious. The baby isn't sleeping. You're reading into things." The words were tender, but they were also an indictment, like he was offering her a blanket woven from her own doubt. "You know this maneuver, don't you, the gentle poison? The 'I'm concerned about you' that really means shut up." She watched him as he tried to reframe the narrative with the skill of a man who'd always been rewarded for being the calm one, the steady one, the golden son who never raised his voice. He talked in circles until the room felt like a carousel, then he kissed her temple and turned off the lamp. But in the dark, when his breathing evened out, she lay awake, with the baby's small body pressed against her ribs, feeling 2 heartbeats and cataloging every detail. The next morning he made pancakes. He slid one onto a tiny plate with a smiley face made of blueberries like love could be arranged into safe geometry. He cooed at the baby. He reached for her waist a little too confidently. He said, "We're good right with that particular male optimism that assumes closure because he's declared it." "You might have said yes to get through breakfast." She nodded too. "Not agreement, just strategy. There's a difference, and if you've ever had to become the quiet mother to survive, you know it." She bought a second baby monitor that afternoon. The first sat on the nightstand, pointed at the crib. This one was discreet, a matte black eye tucked behind a stack of board books. He never noticed. Men like him almost never notice the background. They are too busy watching themselves center frame. He started coming home later again. A client dinner, a branch review. He turned his phone face down on the counter with a reflex he probably thought was subtle. Once when he went to shower, a message flashed across the lock screen before it dimmed. "Miss your laugh." Her hand hovered over the device like it was a scorpion. She didn't pick it up. She was done chasing proof. She was building theater. At night, she practiced with the baby a game of shapes. She would tap the little wooden heart on a shape sorter and say, "Heart." The baby, delighted by the sound and the softness of the word, would smack it with her palm. Heart, heart, heart. The baby learned to search for the symbol with that single-minded baby hunger, proud of herself every time she found it. It wasn't cruel, it was choreography. When you've been made the fool a small part of you, dreams of applause when the curtain finally falls. You can judge her if you want, or you can admit there's a cold, feral intelligence that wakes up in you when someone breaks the covenant you swore on sleepless nights and swollen feet. One Friday, he posted a photo of the three of them on his story, the perfect family sunshine and smiles. He added a caption about blessings. She watched the likes stack up from women in their neighborhood, from colleagues, from his mother with a string of prayer hands. Image is oxygen for men like him. He inhaled until he was dizzy. He bought the baby a musical phone pastel buttons that played tinny songs. The heart button lit up when pressed. She laughed out loud when she saw it because fate sometimes winks with both eyes. The baby loved that button too. Heart, heart, heart. The living room became a chorus of soft clicks and little giggles. On Sunday, she put on a cotton dress and braided her hair. He said they should go to the park. He took a picture where he was positioned slightly forward like he always was in group shots, and she allowed it. He offered to hold the diaper bag. She let him. She slipped his phone next to the wipes when he wasn't looking. She knew the code. She knew the background. She knew exactly where the heart lived. You've paced the edge of decisions like this, haven't you? The precipice before you step into the scene you wrote in your head 100 times. Back home, the baby toddled from couch to coffee table, hands steadying on every surface like the room itself was mothering her. He turned on a game and pretended not to watch his phone, though he checked it every minute. She placed the phone on the rug in plain sight, an innocent offering among toys. The screen dozed and woke, dozed and woke. The baby's eyes tracked the glow like a moth. "Sweetheart," she called, voice airy as a curtain lifting. "Can you press the heart?" The baby clapped. She crouched chubby fingers, landing with incredible precision on the exact same symbol she'd been trained to love. The heart opened. A video call began to ring. He didn't realize until the sound bled over the game commentary, his head-snapped pupils shrinking, his face rearranging itself into panic, as if someone had pulled his mask off by the strap. He lunged too late. The screen filled with a woman's face, blurred for a second by motion, then crisp, glossy hair, office lighting behind her eyes, widening when she saw the baby, then him, then the echo of his living room in the tiny rectangle. "Hey," the woman said, startled and soft, the kind of voice you use when you've been told to stay a secret so long you forget how loud you're allowed to be. The baby squealed. "Heart," she chirped into the phone. "You felt that shot like a bell, didn't you?" Not rage, clarity. He stabbed at the screen, fumbling the call into an ending that didn't disguise anything. He started with anger, the first refuge. "Why would you—" He gestured at the baby, at the phone, at the world. "Why would you let her touch your heart?" she asked. And that was the moment something old and patient inside her smiled. He blustered. He chose denial like a drowning man chooses air. "It's work. She's my team. Don't be paranoid." But his hands were shaking. The baby tapped the black screen again, hopeful. "Heart, heart, heart." You don't need a confession when the body betrays the tongue. She didn't argue. She picked up the phone and set it on the mantel, a tiny gilded stage. "Dinner in 10, she said quietly. "Wash your hands." He stared at her, not understanding that while he was busy managing perceptions, she'd been taming silence like a wild animal. The quiet mother, the shadow wife, the woman who does not raise her voice because she owns the room. That night, while he pretended to eat, the baby gnawed a teething ring in her high chair and banged it triumphantly every time she found the heart symbol on the tray print. Tap, tap, tap. Each knock was a drumbeat you could march toward a truth with. He slept on the edge of the bed, rigid as a statue. She lay still. The baby dreamed between them, small fists opening and closing as if catching invisible light. In the morning, he said, "We need to talk." She smiled without showing teeth. "We will," she said, "but not about your version." Then she lifted the baby, kissed her head, and carried the only witness who mattered into the day. He followed her into the kitchen like a shadow, words spilling before the kettle had even finished its first hiss. "You've got it wrong," he insisted, voice pitched somewhere between pleading and performance. "It's nothing. You've built a story in your head." "You've heard that, haven't you? The accusation that your intuition is just a fairy tale you stitched together while folding laundry?" She didn't answer right away. She poured boiling water over the tea bag, watching the amber spiral bloom in the mug. The baby sat in her high chair, smearing mashed banana across the tray, her tiny fingers finding the printed heart, again tap, tap, tap. That sound was louder than his entire defense. "Do you want me to believe you?" she asked finally. Not, "Do you want me to trust you?" Not, "Is it true?" Just, "Do you want me to believe you?" because belief in this house now was currency. "Yes," he said, but it landed without conviction. She turned, leaning against the counter, letting the silence extend until it felt like a rope tightening. "Then earn it." His face twisted confusion, fear, a flicker of anger. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said slowly, "that until you can tell me the truth without me dragging it out of you, you'll live with the fact that I already know." He blinked like the words were foreign. Men like him are fluent in denial, but not in the dialect of a woman who stopped playing. For the next few days, the house became a stage for a strange, quiet play. He moved carefully, speaking in measured tones, overcompensating with the baby. He'd read her books in the evening, make exaggerated faces to coax giggles. The baby responded, but her joy was pure, untouched by the undercurrent threading through the adults. The heart game continued, innocent on her part, deliberate on hers. One night she found him sitting in the dark living room, scrolling his phone. She stepped into the doorway. "You could delete it all," she said. "Block her. Wipe the messages. But the problem isn't the evidence." He looked up. "Then what is it?" "You," she said simply, and the word landed like a weight in his lap. He tried again to explain. This time the story shifted. It wasn't serious. It was a distraction. It just happened. He used the phrases of a man hoping to dilute betrayal into a mistake, but she didn't bite. She didn't even blink. "Do you know how unnerving that is? To perform an entire confession scene and have the audience refuse to clap." He went to bed first that night. She lingered in the kitchen, sipping tea, the baby monitor on the counter. She watched her daughter's tiny chest rise and fall in the grainy glow. She thought about the women she'd seen growing up, the ones who swallowed their pride for the family's sake, their eyes dulling over years of compromise. She had sworn she'd never join them, but here she was balancing on that exact edge. In the morning he tried a different tactic. Gifts, small ones, as though trust could be bought in trinkets. A scarf she hadn't asked for, a bouquet of lilies, her least favorite flower, which he should have known. That was telling, wasn't it? A man can cheat with precision, but love carelessly. The baby began saying heart without prompting, pointing at everything vaguely resembling the shape of a strawberry, the loop of a necklace, the printed logo on a grocery bag. Each time the word was a chisel against the wall he was trying to rebuild. By the end of the week, she could see the exhaustion in his posture. The pretending was draining him. He wanted resolution, a reset, a return to before. But she had no interest in before. Before was where she'd been blind. Saturday morning, she packed the diaper bag. "We're going out," she said. "Where?" he asked. "You'll see." They drove in silence. The baby babbled to herself in the back seat, clutching her musical phone, pressing the heart button until its tinny song filled the car. She pulled up to his parents' house. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Why here?" "You'll see," she repeated. Inside, his mother greeted them warmly, fussing over the baby. They sat in the living room, tea and biscuits laid out. She placed the baby on the floor with her toys, the shape sorter, the musical phone. She waited until everyone settled. Then she looked at the baby and said, "Show Grandma your favorite button." The baby's eyes lit up. She crawled to the musical phone, pressed the heart, and shouted heart. The little tune played cheerful and oblivious. His mother smiled. "Oh, that's sweet." "She's been practicing," she said evenly. "She knows what the heart means now." He froze, the blood draining from his face. His father glanced at him, sharp-eyed, sensing something under the surface. She didn't need to explain further. The air was already thick with it. This was the power of implication, heavier than proof, more enduring than accusation. You can feel it, can't you? The way a single symbol repeated enough becomes a mirror no one can avoid. That night on the drive home, he didn't speak, not a word. She didn't fill the silence. The baby slept in the back, the musical phone resting on her lap like a tiny oracle. When they pulled into the driveway, he finally said, "You've made your point." "No," she replied, unbuckling the baby. "I've just let you see it." And in his eyes, she saw it, the first crack in his conviction, the knowledge that she wasn't going to scream or leave or forgive. She was going to stand. And he would have to live in that shadow until the truth came out of his own mouth. By the following week, the tension in the house had turned into something almost physical, like a cold draft that curled under the doors and refused to leave. He started hovering, lingering in rooms longer than necessary, as if his presence alone could smooth over the jaggedness between them. But you know the truth, once the fracture is visible, you can't unsee it. She carried on with the routines, feeding the baby, wiping the counters, folding the laundry with slow, deliberate movements like every crease and tuck was a way to reclaim order. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't issue ultimatums, and that quiet, that restraint rattled him more than any fight would have. One night after the baby was asleep, he sat across from her at the table. He was holding a glass of whiskey, the amber catching the kitchen light. "I've been thinking," he began, and she noticed his hand tightening around the glass, the faint tremor in his knuckles. "About what?" she asked without looking up from the tea she was pouring. "About us, about how far we've drifted. I don't want it to be like this." She almost laughed. This, as if it were something they both built together instead of something he detonated in his own hands. "Then stop drifting," she said. He leaned forward. "It wasn't what you think. She's a friend. We got close. It got complicated, but it's not." "You can stop there," she interrupted, her voice, even the kind of calm that feels like standing in the eye of a storm. "I'm not interested in your edits." His jaw tightened. "You're not even giving me a chance to explain." "I've already heard the truth," she said, meeting his eyes. "From your silences, from your timing, from your hands." He looked away, then sipping the whiskey to buy himself a moment. "People forget that lies aren't only told in words. They're in the way you can't sit still, the way your eyes skip over the person you've hurt, the way your breath changes when you're calculating." The days stretched on. He became quieter, more cautious, like a man walking through a house with invisible tripwires. The baby, oblivious, grew more vocal heart, becoming one of her favorite words used for anything she loved, her stuffed rabbit, her sippy cup, the sunlight on the floor. Every time she said it, he flinched. On Thursday, she suggested they host his parents for dinner. His eyes narrowed slightly, searching for the trap, but he agreed. Maybe he thought this was her way of thawing the ice. She cooked all afternoon, the baby strapped to her hip for part of it. When his parents arrived, she greeted them warmly, set the table, and made sure the musical phone and the shape sorter were placed in plain sight on the living room rug. Dinner was polite, almost cheerful. His mother complimented the roast chicken. His father asked about the baby's new words. "She has a favorite," she said lightly, turning to her daughter. "Show Grandpa." The baby picked up the shape sorter heart and held it high, grinning. "Heart," she shouted. Everyone chuckled. Then she toddled over to the coffee table, where his phone face up unlocked because he'd been careless sat glowing. She tapped the heart icon in a messaging app. A thread opened full of messages. The top one read, "Miss you already." His mother froze mid-sip. His father's eyes flicked to him, sharp and assessing. The baby clapped, delighted by the glowing screen. Heart Daddy's heart. You could almost hear the walls inhale. He snatched the phone, muttering, "Not for you, sweetheart," but it was too late. The moment had been seen. And once something is seen, it lives. After his parents left, his mother hugging her a second longer than usual, his father offering a curt nod, he turned on her. "You set that up." She didn't deny it. "I didn't need to," she said. "You left it open. You always do. That's the problem. You think you're careful, but you've been leaving trails for months." His face was red, his voice sharp. "You're humiliating me in front of my family." She stood gathering plates with a quiet efficiency that made him feel smaller with each clink. "No," she said, "you did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." And there it was, the real shift. She wasn't playing defense anymore. She was holding the line, and he could feel it. That night, she didn't go to bed when he did. She stayed in the living room, the baby monitor glowing beside her, and thought about the way women are taught to protect men from the consequences of their own actions, how that's mistaken for loyalty, how it rots you from the inside. Upstairs, he tossed and turned. Downstairs, she sipped her tea, the steam curling like a promise in the dim light. She wasn't going to explode. She wasn't going to beg. She was going to wait. And when the truth finally came out of his own mouth, it would be because the weight of silence had grown too heavy to bear. By Sunday morning, the silence between them had calcified into something unyielding. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of a chess match where each move mattered too much to rush. He'd stopped making small talk altogether, as though every word might be used against him. She noticed him glancing at the baby more often, but never for long. It was as if he feared what might come out of her mouth next. You've felt that kind of dread before, haven't you? When you're not sure if the danger is outside you or inside you, and every moment feels like a countdown. She didn't push. She moved through the day as if nothing had changed, preparing breakfast, folding tiny socks, humming to the baby as she mashed up pears. He followed her into the kitchen once or twice, starting sentences he didn't know how to finish. We should, or I was thinking before retreating back into silence. That afternoon, she loaded the stroller and said they were going for a walk. The baby clutched her musical phone, pressing the heart button every few minutes so its cheerful chime floated out into the crisp air. They passed neighbors who waved smiling at the picture-perfect young family. But under that image, the ground was shifting. When they returned, she placed the stroller in the hallway and carried the baby upstairs for her nap. He followed them halfway, then lingered at the bottom step. "Are you going to tell me what you want?" he asked. Finally, his voice edged with frustration. She looked down at him, one hand on the banister, the baby's head resting on her shoulder. "No," she said. "You already know." That night, after the baby was asleep, she found him in the study. He was sitting at the desk phone in his hand, the glow of the screen illuminating his face. She didn't ask who he was texting. She just stood in the doorway until he noticed her, until he had to put the phone down. "I've ended it," he said suddenly like an offering. "It's over. I told her we can't talk anymore." She stepped into the room, her gaze steady. "Did you tell her why?" He hesitated, and that hesitation was the answer. "I said it was complicated," he admitted. "Complicated," she repeated, tasting the word. "Like a knot you don't want to untangle." He ran a hand over his face. "I'm trying." "No," she said. "You're managing. You're trying to keep everything just quiet enough that you don't have to face yourself." He flinched like she'd reached inside and found the softest part. For the next 3 days, she gave him nothing. No questions, no accusations. Just the kind of stillness that becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, he began to look smaller. Wednesday evening, the baby was in her high chair again, banging the shape sorter hard against the tray. "Heart, Daddy's heart," she sang, clapping. He froze mid-bite, his fork suspended. She saw his eyes flicker fear, shame, the urge to shut it down. But she didn't intervene. She let the words echo through the kitchen, let him sit in the sound. Later, when the baby was asleep, he found her in the bedroom folding laundry. "I can't take this anymore," he said. "The waiting, the games." She looked up from the shirt in her hands. "It's not a game. It's a reckoning." His shoulders sagged. "Fine," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. "I was wrong. I crossed lines I shouldn't have. I liked the attention. I liked feeling." He stopped himself, but it was too late. She could see the truth he was afraid to say. "I liked feeling wanted in a way I didn't have to earn." She didn't cry. She didn't lash out. She just folded the shirt and placed it in the drawer. And now she asked. "I want to fix it," he said. She shook her head. "You want me to erase it. Those are not the same thing." He looked at her then, like a man who finally realizes the door he thought was locked from the outside has been open the whole time, and she's the one standing in the frame deciding whether to let him through. That night, she lay awake with the baby curled beside her. She thought about every woman she'd ever known who'd been taught that forgiveness was a duty, not a choice. How easily that lesson becomes a leash. She thought about the baby's small hands tapping the heart over and over, not knowing yet what it symbolized, but claiming it as hers anyway. And she decided she would not raise her daughter in a house where a man's comfort mattered more than the truth. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, catching in the steam from the kettle. She stood at the counter, watching the tendrils curl upward, thinking how they looked like something escaping. He came in quietly, as if testing the air. "You didn't sleep," he said. She didn't answer. She poured her tea, placed the mug on the table, and sat down with the baby in her lap. The child reached for the spoon, giggling when it clinked against the mug. She let her small rebellions belong to them both now. He sat across from her, hands folded like a student waiting for an exam. "I told her not to contact me again," he said, voice steady but thin. And she said she understood. She studied him for a long moment. "Did you mean it?" His eyes flickered, not with guilt this time, but with the reflex to perform sincerity. "Yes. But you know when you've been lied to too many times, even the truth sounds counterfeit." She fed the baby slices of banana, her voice low and even. "Here's the thing," she said. "I don't care if you meant it. I care that you understand why it got this far, why you thought you could do it and I'd never know, why you thought you could live 2 lives and both would stay clean." He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. "Don't answer now. Sit with it. Let it make you uncomfortable." The rest of the day passed in a strange calm. He did the dishes without being asked. He folded laundry. He played with the baby on the living room floor, his laugh too loud, too forced. She watched from the doorway, not fooled by the performance. That night, when the baby was asleep, she walked into the living room and placed the musical phone on the coffee table. The heart button glowed faintly in the dim light. "Do you know why I let her be the one to find you out?" she asked. He frowned, leaning back on the couch. "To embarrass me." She shook her head. "No, because you can argue with me. You can twist my words, gaslight, deny. But you can't argue with her. You can't rewrite what she saw. You can't touch the part of yourself that flinched when she said heart and meant you." He stared at the little plastic phone like it was a weapon. Maybe it was. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "You want to fix this, start by realizing that I am not the woman you think I am. I am not here to protect you from yourself, and I will not raise my daughter to think silence is the price of love." His face softened, but it wasn't enough. He looked small-cornered, a man finally seeing the shape of his own shadow. Over the next week, she noticed the shift. He checked his phone less. He stayed closer to home, but she didn't mistake these changes for transformation. They were survival tactics, and survival tactics are temporary. On Friday, he suggested they take the baby to the park. She agreed. They walked under pale winter sunlight, the baby bundled in a tiny hat, gripping her musical phone. She pressed the heart button, giggling at the song. Other parents smiled at the sight, assuming they were a happy family. But here's the thing, appearances are cheap. She had stopped buying them. When they got home, she took the baby upstairs for her nap. He lingered in the living room, scrolling through his phone. She came back down quietly and watched from the doorway. His face was unreadable, but the screen's glow illuminated a new thread, one with no hearts, no names she recognized. He looked up and caught her watching. "It's work," he said quickly. She said nothing. Josh walked past him, picked up the musical phone, and pressed the heart button. The melody filled the room. He stared at her, and in that look was the truth he knew she would never stop watching. Later that night, as she lay beside the baby, she realized something had shifted inside her. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't rage. It was clarity. She didn't need him to confess every detail. She didn't need him to bleed out his guilt at her feet. She had already taken back what mattered, the part of herself that believed she was powerless. And when you reclaim that, you stop begging for proof. You stop waiting for apologies to heal you. You start deciding how the story ends. 2 weeks later, the air in the house felt thinner. Not lighter, just less suffocating. She had learned to move through it without brushing against him more than necessary. He, in turn, had learned to keep his voice measured, his footsteps careful, as if the floor might splinter under him at any moment. You know that stage, don't you? The one where no one says the word ending, but both can feel it crawling under the wallpaper. The baby was changing fast now. New words each week, new stumbles toward independence, and every time those small lips shaped the word heart, it was as if the universe pressed a finger into the bruise of what had happened. She didn't correct her. She let it live there, a reminder that innocence doesn't protect anyone from the truth. One afternoon, he suggested they go to lunch, just the two of them. "We need time alone," he said, but his tone sounded more like negotiation than romance. She agreed, not because she wanted to hear him out, but because she wanted to see if he'd use the space to finally be honest. At the restaurant, sunlight slanted across the table, catching in the condensation on their glasses. He talked first about the baby, then worked circling the real subject like a man afraid of his own reflection. Finally, she said, "We've been sitting here for 40 minutes, and you haven't said the one thing that matters." He looked at her jaw tight, which is, "Why you did it," she said. "Not the convenient version, not the we drifted story, the real reason." He leaned back, fingers drumming the table. "Because I could," he said, and for a moment she saw something raw in him, not remorse, but recognition. "Because I thought you'd never find out. And if you did, I thought you'd forgive me eventually." There it was, the naked truth, unadorned and ugly. She didn't look away. And now, he said, voice dropping, "I'm not sure you ever will." "Good," she replied. "That's the only honest thing you've said to me in months." They ate in silence after that. When the check came, she let him pay. Not because she owed him anything, but because she knew the transaction would gnaw at him, a reminder that money couldn't buy back what he'd traded away for a handful of stolen moments. That night, she put the baby to bed and went to the closet. She pulled out a small box she'd kept hidden inside, were mementos from the years before, love notes, photographs, ticket stubs from concerts where they'd screamed lyrics into the dark together. She sat on the floor and sifted through them, not crying, not angry, just taking stock. When he found her there, he hesitated in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Seeing what's worth keeping," she said. He stepped inside, looking at the pile of keepsakes. and she set aside one photograph, the two of them at the beach, wind in their hair, his arm around her waist in a way that had once felt like safety. "This one stays," she said. "Not because I believe in what we were, but because I want to remember who I was before I started making myself small for you." He swallowed, eyes darting to the floor. Over the next few days, she noticed him studying her more, as if trying to map the distance that had grown between them. He asked if she wanted to talk about the future. She said she already was. One evening, while he was reading the baby a bedtime story, she stood in the doorway and watched. The baby's hand rested on the heart print of her pajama top, tapping it unconsciously as he turned the pages. When she caught his eye, she didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. Later in the kitchen, he said, "I feel like you're waiting for something." "I am," she replied. "For you to realize I'm not staying because I need you. I'm staying until I decide what's best for her." He froze, the weight of that distinction hitting him harder than any threat could. That night she slept soundly for the first time in months. Not because anything had been resolved, but because she understood something vital. She was no longer afraid of his absence. The fear had been the leash, and now it was gone. The next morning, she dressed the baby in a white dress with a tiny embroidered heart. At breakfast, the child patted her chest and said, "Mama's heart," grinning wide. She kissed her daughter's head, holding her close, and thought, "Yes, this one's mine, and no one touches it again without earning it." The woman who knows her worth doesn't beg, she watches. Then she rises.